Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We'll just give folks a minute or two to get settled in, and then there's one or two more we're expecting to join us, and then we'll start probably in a minute or so. It looks like people are getting settled. Perhaps if I could have the next slide. It's our practice, even though we're, of course, meeting virtually, to still honor the reality of our history and the land. And so we do this through the land acknowledgements. Today we meet on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of the First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. We respect the longstanding relationships with First Nations people in this place in the 100-mile Windsor-Essex Peninsula and the Straits, Les Détroits of Detroit. So welcome everyone. We'll just start, if I can have the next slide, with a brief video welcome from leaders of the project.
Hello, on behalf of all of us at the Windsor-Essex Regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Systems Leadership Table, we want to thank you for your interest in the development of our region's first ever Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Together, our goal is to build a community where everyone feels safe, has a sense of belonging, has access to services and opportunities, and can have their needs met across the region.
We want to hear from you. We want to understand what your priorities and concerns are for the safety and well-being of our community so that we can create a plan to advance the interests of all residents across Windsor and the County of Essex. So please make your voice heard by participating in our online survey,
or by registering for one of the virtual public meetings happening in each of the region's 8 municipalities. To get involved, visit us online at cswbwindsoressex.ca. And thank you from all of us.
Well, yeah, that's the operative phrase, thank you, because it's really important that you're here and really terrific that you have given your time to participate this evening. There's just a couple of brief housekeeping matters, and then I'll go over the agenda, do a few introductions, and then we'll roll right into the content. We've all been at this for a year or so now of online meetings, but do try to remember to mute yourself unless you're speaking. And of course, you can either use the mute button that's on the screen that looks like the icon that you see on the right side of the screen we're showing you now, or you can also do it on your phone or your iPad if that's what you're using. And we'll mute you if you don't, and I'm sure we're partners in not wanting to have whatever's going on in your household be broadcast for prosperity. But I want you to know that if we mute you, we'll also be happy to unmute you when it's time to speak, because of course it's really important that we hear from you tonight. We just want to make sure that what we're hearing is what you want to say, not what might be going on with your dog barking or what have you. When it comes to posing questions, because this is predominantly an interactive session, you can do that either by using the chat box, or you can do it by raising your hand and letting us know that you want to speak. I mean, frankly, going like this works really well too. But the other really important point is we'll be breaking up into a couple of groups. And so we should have a nice small environment which we'll be able to share information in. So it should be quite comfortable, and we're not going to need to be unduly formal with all of this stuff. So I'm quite confident that the technology is not going to get in our way. We do have closed captioning services. If you require those, make sure you let us know. And the best way to let us know if you have any technical issues is to send a message to CSWB, who you'll see as there it is up on the screen there, CSWB Windsor-Essex. You can send a message to there. That's actually Lindsay who will be answering that, and she's our technical whiz who keeps everything moving. I should also just say you're certainly encouraged to turn on your camera. It certainly makes for a more enjoyable experience of everybody being able to see each other. But on the other hand, that's totally your choice. And if you're more comfortable being in a environment where you're not showing that, then by all means, there's no need to do so. The other thing is, the other thing is our team monitors the discussions and of course reserves the right to delete any comments or remove any participants who are making inappropriate comments. We say this because this is a community safety and well-being exercise, and the safety starts here and now as far as we're concerned. And so we want this to be a safe zone for everybody to participate in a way that's comfortable for them. But honestly, we say this mostly as a matter of record because we know anybody who's been kind enough to donate their time to the process this evening it has come with a good spirit. We're not really anticipating to have to deal with that. But I should just say for the record that that's the way we'll approach any issues of that kind. So if I can just jump to the next slide, as you'll see from the agenda, we are right now in the process of just going through the sort of the housekeeping and introductions and welcome, and we'll be through that as quickly as we can because, as we say, the important point is to hear from you, not from us. Once we are completed with the intro, we'll have a quick overview on the overall project. We'll then move as swiftly as we can to breakout sessions where there'll be opportunities for each of you to give us your feedback on a couple of key questions about well-being in your community. And then, as we often would have done if we'd all been together in the same room, when that's finished, we'll come back together again for a report back and group discussion. We'll aim to have it all done promptly in an hour and a half. We found that timing's been working quite well. And that frankly, it's been quite an enjoyable experience for everybody involved. So we're looking forward to another sort of fun evening of hearing about and learning about another dynamic and important community in Windsor-Essex. So if we can just jump to the next slide, we'll give you a quick sense of who you're dealing with tonight. I apologize for the false advertising in regard to hair. That is obviously an older photo, but yes, that's me. I'm John, and I'm a partner at Strategy Corp. Who has been in full compliance with the ban on visiting haircutting establishments. There's also Brian Teefy from our firm and Olivia LaHaye, who's here as well. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to Leo Gill. I don't think Stephen's here tonight, but he's the manager of social policy and planning, and he's from Windsor. And then we have Michelle Sushiu and Lindsay Rive, who I already mentioned on our IT. And if I can just introduce you now to Leo. Leo has been working around the clock on this project since it got going about a year ago. He's the project manager and led the initial process around the establishment of all the teams that we're working with across the community. And he's going to provide you with a bit of a background on the process for tonight, take you through some of that, and we'll just dive in right now. So Leo, why don't you please tell us about the overall plan?
Thank you very much, John. So first off, I like to kind of go over some of the basic questions that we tend to have when coming into these types of virtual public meetings. The first being very basic, what is community safety and well-being planning? And really, community safety and well-being planning is truly about creating a collaborative approach to service delivery, one that involves multiple sectors and community partners, and is focused on being proactive and preventative, all for the goal of addressing local priorities related to crime and complex social issues. Really, to do this, municipal and regional leaders are working together with partners across several different fields with the goal of creating a community where everyone feels safe, has a sense of belonging, has access to services and opportunities, and can have their needs met. What I find is very important about these goals and the approach itself is that it recognizes that there are factors that influence our feelings of safety and well-being beyond whether a crime has occurred. It can be stigma, discrimination, even a lack of access to resources. Also, though, the approach recognizes that for every risk, there is a community strength and asset, and really these should be our starting blocks and our building blocks. And finally, that everyone has a role to play in improving our safety and well-being. So another question may be, why now? Why are we undertaking this project now? Well, over the past 2 decades, provincial data and research focusing on how to address some of today's complex social issues have really highlighted the importance of prevention, crime prevention, for instance, and really strengthening communities and involving different sectors to creating solutions. Based on this research, in 2018, the provincial government passed legislation that required all municipalities to prepare and adopt a CSWB plan. But beyond the fact that it's legislated, there's a lot of great local benefits that we'll be able to talk about in just a second. Next slide, please. And just to make sure that we have a better understanding of this approach, we do have a CSWB framework that we're utilizing in creating this plan. Really, there are 4 areas of intervention that this framework utilizes. The first at the top is social development, that's that green layer, then prevention, risk intervention, and incident response. Now, commonly, when we think of safety interventions, we tend to focus on the bullseye there, that red dot of incident response. And we approach it from a policing or emergency services perspective. But as I was kind of mentioning, research is showing that really that first responders are being called to situations related to well-being that are symptoms of larger issues, things like a mental health crisis or housing insecurity. And these are issues that first responders can't solve alone. If we move up a layer to that risk intervention layer, that yellow one, this layer is really focusing on reducing harm before it gets to the point of an incident. And this type of work is not usually about creating community-wide strategies, and instead is focusing on providing wraparound type services to particular individuals in need. The next layer, however, prevention, is about proactively identifying and addressing local risks before they escalate. And this layer is where all community members, groups, and sectors really have a strong role to play. And finally, the top layer is social development. In this layer, it usually involves longer-term investments or strategies to improve larger scale issues like access to income, education, or quality housing, to name a few. And work in this layer involves us looking beyond the incident at the social causes and understanding that those causes need integrated and collective responses. So just to pull all of these concepts together, instead of starting at the red dot, if we start at the social development layer up top, then we can work to build on protective factors and strengths. We can emphasize prevention and risk mitigation strategies through things like data, and ultimately work to reduce the number of incidents we need to respond to by intervening before challenges become crises. Next slide, please. Now that we have a bit of background on the project, I just want to quickly jump into the Windsor-Essex approach. The plan will be developed, or is being developed really, in a joint city-county approach. And while it's developed through regional collaboration, the plan will include appendices and data profiles for each municipality. The intent here is to ensure that those local priorities from each municipality are identified and those local strengths are identified. Another way to think of this is that we understand there may be some challenges that cut across all municipalities across the region, but there may be some things that are localized, that are different across each municipality, and we need to understand those a bit better. And that way we can provide solutions that might be more nuanced. So guiding plan development, there are 2 different teams. There's the regional CSWB Systems Leadership Table and the Enhanced Sector Network. The Systems Leadership Table is made up of leaders from across multiple sectors like health and mental health, education, community and social services, law enforcement, and public safety, to name a few. The Enhanced Sector Network, on the other hand, consists of frontline staff and members from community organizations and committees that work alongside 8 historically underrepresented communities. These communities include First Nations and Indigenous peoples, racialized persons, newcomers, youth, seniors, 2S LGBTQ+ folk, accessibility communities, and then broader community groups that are usually connected with individuals with lived experience with homelessness as well as substance use challenges. So we're working together to narrow down the focus, the scope of this project, and really with the objective of identifying priority risk factors, identifying strategies to reduce those priority risk factors, and then setting measurable outcomes to make sure that we know how we're doing when we are looking towards providing solutions for some of these challenges. Next slide, please. So overall, this plan really aims to take advantage of existing community strengths, resources, and best practices, and really try to mold those to create proactive approaches to address identified local risks. There are a number of different benefits that I mentioned beforehand, but some of those include, for instance, enhancing communications across different agencies and organizations so that we have a better idea of what's available and how we can collaborate. We can also increase understanding of those local risks, as well as those groups that may be more vulnerable to some of those risks. In addition to that, ensuring that services are provided to individuals with complex needs. And lastly, increasing our awareness and coordination and access to services for community members to be able to access. The next slide. So as with everything, COVID-19 did put a pause on our project for a brief period of time, but we relaunched in June 2020. And since that relaunch, we've been able to develop a current state data report and an interactive data map, both of which will be made public in the coming weeks. We also were able to complete presentations informing our elected officials from each municipal council about the project and where we currently work. Also, through our Enhanced Sector Network group, we've actually been able to engage 96 frontline staff and representatives from existing committees and organizations. And they've been absolutely vital to contextualizing that data that I was talking about beforehand through that data report, and also making sure that we include them in the prioritization process for community risk factors. Once we've completed our public consultation, which is today and also through our online survey, and we've been able to analyze the data, we'll be developing the final report and submitting it to municipal and county councils for adoption. We expect the plan to be fully completed and made public by the end of the year. Next slide. And with that, if you have any questions so far about the process, I know I went through a lot of information kind of quickly, please let me know and I can answer that for you right now.
Doesn't look like we have any questions, Leo.
Okay, great. So I'll pass it over to Olivia to go to the next part of this session.
Hi. So as Leo mentioned, we did conduct a current state data report as part of this project that we're undergoing. And the idea behind that report was to create a baseline to help us assess safety and well-being in our communities today as it stands, and also to help identify future areas of improvement. Now, this is one vantage point by which we can look at community safety and well-being across the region. It looks at data sets from a number of different sources, including financial and housing services from municipalities, police services, StatsCan, and other provincial data sets like EQAO. It's worth mentioning that we use a lot of StatsCan data. Given that it's a census year, it means we're a little limited in that we're using 2016 data. So as I mentioned, I say it's one vantage point because there are limitations to data in every case. And so when we go over this stuff, it's a useful tool, but something that we have to keep in the broader picture of a lot of other sources of information that we need to collect, including through consultations like this one. The data report looks at a number of categories and range of factors impacting safety and well-being. To name them, we look at crime and victimization, education, financial security, mental health and substance use, physical health, housing and neighborhoods, and COVID-19, which is it's its own category, but also obviously directly impacts every other one of the categories we listed. And the idea here is to look at not just statistics that look at incidents of crime, but also look into data that can give us an understanding of the underlying causes of illegal behavior in our communities. Next slide. So with that, we created municipal profiles based on this data, and we've created a slide that goes over some of the highlights from LaSalle. Next slide, please. So in terms of some of the things that we looked at, violent and drug crime is below regional averages in LaSalle, although property and traffic crimes are about at the regional averages or slightly above. But the town in general has significantly less severe crime than the rest of the region. Educational attainment is above regional averages. Median household income is above regional averages, and childhood poverty is below regional averages. The town also has the highest rates of home ownership across the region. Some of the town's strategies in its strategic vision that have to do with community safety and well-being include promoting strong infrastructure and climate resilience, including the need for green practices to promote environmental stewardship, strengthening community engagement and a sense of participation through digital and traditional tools, and through the promotion of community groups, and encouraging and diversifying economic development, including developing the waterfront area, designated business districts, and partnering with secondary school institutions to support the future of LaSalle's workforce. On the other side of the slide there, you can see just some of the things we pulled from StatsCan in terms of age distribution, population, median household income, and ethnic origin populations from StatsCan's report. So that is LaSalle's highlight reel. So if we go to the next slide. With that kind of in mind, we'd like to break out into, I do see we've gotten a couple more people, so I think we'll break out into probably 2 groups. And everyone will be randomly assigned to a group. And the idea here is we have 5 questions we'd like to go over, and we find that the smaller groups do provide, you know, a bit more of a chance for everyone to have their say. There will be a host from our team in each group, and our job is to make sure everyone gets heard, but also to make sure that we get to all the questions. So we'll help guide you through the discussion and make sure we get to hear everyone's thoughts on all the questions we have. Afterwards, we'll come back to this main group together, and we'll share some of the main themes that came out of the discussion so we can hear what the other groups are talking about, and hopefully have a good discussion. A couple of reminders, just that I have the, you know, raise your hand and don't forget to unmute yourself. These smaller groups tend to be able to have a pretty open discussion, but you're free to also use things like the chat function and raise hand if you wish. All right, so I'll leave it to Lindsay to send us on our way.
All right, I'll open all the rooms and just hit join room and you should be good.